What began as a confident declaration of independence quickly turned into one of the most legally tangled and emotionally charged dramas K-pop has seen in years. At the center of it all stood Danielle, once a core member of NewJeans, now facing the collapse of her contract, her position in the group, and the trust that once bound 5 members together. This story does not start with rumors or online speculation, but with a courtroom decision that would quietly set everything in motion. On October 30th, the Seoul Central District Court delivered its final ruling. NewJeans did not have legal grounds to terminate their exclusive contracts with Adore. Every argument presented by the members was dismissed due to a lack of evidence, and the court made it clear that their contracts would remain valid until 2029. No dramatic fines, no crushing compensation demands, just a binding order that forced the group back under the company's authority. What many fans underestimated was the injunction that followed, one that strictly prohibited any independent activity by the members, regardless of scale. At the time, the ruling felt like a pause button rather than an ending. ADOR framed its response as an attempt to reunite and stabilize the group, emphasizing control rather than punishment. Behind the scenes, however, the tension was far from resolved. Each member reacted differently, and subtle fractures began to show. While some were already reconsidering their stance, others appeared to be moving in a direction that would soon collide head-on with the court's order. This chapter is not about betrayal just yet, but about the fragile calm that followed a legal storm. A calm that would soon be shattered. Because within weeks of the ruling, actions taken in silence would raise questions no court document could answer. Who truly intended to return, and who had already stepped too far beyond the line? If you want to understand how this legal decision became the spark for a deeper internal collapse, make sure to follow the channel, subscribe, and stay with us as this story continues to unfold. As the legal dust settled, the aftermath revealed a split that was no longer just legal, but deeply personal. Less than 2 weeks after the court's ruling, Adore released a statement that caught fans off guard. Only 2 members publicly confirmed their intention to return to the company. The language was careful, restrained, and emphasized respect for the court's decision after discussions with their families. To the public, it appeared as a step toward reconciliation. Behind it, however, was a growing imbalance within the group. Almost immediately, confusion spread when the remaining members released a separate statement of their own, announcing their intent to return as well. The timing, the wording, and the fact that it was not coordinated with Adore raised quiet alarms. The company responded cautiously, stating they were still assessing the true intentions behind the announcement. What should have been a unified return instead exposed cracks that could no longer be hidden. Private meetings followed. Parents were present. Conversations stretched on for weeks. Some families appeared open to rebuilding trust, while others remained entrenched in suspicion. Reports began circulating that certain members had been exposed to distorted narratives about the company for an extended period of time, shaping decisions that now seemed increasingly irreversible. The injunction was still active, the contracts still binding, and yet not everyone was playing by the same understanding of those rules. As discussions dragged on, one name began to surface more frequently, not in public statements, but in whispered speculation: Danielle. While other members were negotiating their way back into compliance, questions emerged about whether she had already crossed a line that could not be undone. The issue was no longer about returning to Adore. It was about whether trust, once broken, could ever be restored. And as the group stood at a crossroads, one silent decision would soon change everything. By the time winter arrived, the situation surrounding Danielle had shifted from uncertainty to confrontation. While Adore continued separate discussions with individual members and their families, one outcome became increasingly clear behind closed doors. Unlike the others, Danielle's negotiations were not moving toward reconciliation. Instead, they were unraveling at an alarming speed. On December 29th, Adore released a statement that sent shockwaves through the fandom. Danielle's exclusive contract had been officially terminated. The wording of the announcement was deliberate and heavy with implication. ADOR stated that after extensive discussions, it had become impossible to continue together with Danielle as both an artist and a member of NewJeans. More striking was the company's declaration that legal accountability would be pursued against a member of Danielle's family and a former executive, citing them as key figures responsible for the dispute and the group's delayed return. For many fans, this marked the moment when the narrative stopped being about misunderstanding and started looking like open conflict. What made the situation even more unsettling was the timing. Other members were actively reflecting, reassessing, and in some cases agreeing to respect the court's ruling. Danielle, however, stood alone. Ador emphasized that while one member chose to realign with the company after objective reflection, Danielle had not. The implication was clear without being stated outright. This was not a sudden decision, but the result of prolonged resistance and broken trust. Speculation intensified when reports emerged that the termination was linked not to public statements or loyalty, but to actions taken during the injunction period. Actions that, if proven true, would mean more than defiance. They would mean a direct violation of a court order. And once that boundary was crossed, there was no path back. The question now was no longer whether Danielle would return, but what she had done to make that impossible. As the pieces began to fall into place, the reason behind Danielle's contract termination slowly came into focus. According to alleged industry insiders, the core issue was not public defiance, but a serious breach of contract carried out quietly and independently. Despite the injunction clearly prohibiting any solo or independent activities, Danielle was accused of signing conflicting agreements while her exclusive contract with Ador was still legally binding. If true, this alone would have been enough to trigger termination. The most explosive allegations centered around a luxury watch brand deal. Originally, NewJeans was expected to enter a three-party contract involving the group, the company, and the brand itself. These agreements are standard in the industry, designed to protect all sides. However, during the dispute period, Danielle allegedly proceeded with a separate two-party contract, excluding both Ador and the group. At the time, the company reportedly believed her activities were connected to the original agreement, until payments failed to appear and the truth became unavoidable. What elevated this from a contractual issue to a personal fracture was the claim that Danielle kept these activities hidden not only from the company, but from her fellow members as well. Secret overseas schedules, undisclosed brand deals, and solo negotiations painted a picture of someone moving ahead alone, while the rest of the group remained trapped under legal restriction. For the other members, this was not just about contracts. It was about loyalty. Insiders claimed that once this came to light, the sense of betrayal within the group became irreversible, trust collapsed, and in a situation already fragile, that collapse may have pushed others to reassess their own positions. Because when one member breaks away in silence, everyone else is forced to choose a side. As the fallout continued to spread, attention shifted to a figure who had remained largely in the shadows until now, Danielle's mother. Allegedly deeply involved from the very beginning, she was described as one of the strongest voices encouraging the members to leave Ador, maintaining close ties with former executives and actively pushing alternative paths behind the scenes. Reports suggested she played a key role in attempting to redirect the group toward another entertainment agency and outside investors, framing the move as liberation rather than risk. The situation escalated further when it was alleged that she interfered directly with the return process of other members. Meetings were delayed, communications were disrupted, families were fed conflicting narratives. In particular, Hanni's case drew intense scrutiny. With language barriers and unfamiliarity with the Korean legal system, Hanni and her family were especially vulnerable to misinformation. What should have been a straightforward discussion with the company turned into weeks of confusion and hesitation, allegedly fueled by distorted accounts of events. Perhaps the most controversial claim was that Danielle's mother encouraged Hanni to act as the group's spokesperson during the height of the dispute, placing her at the center of public backlash while others remained protected. Whether intentional or not, the result was the same. Hanni absorbed the criticism, the pressure, and the emotional toll, while decisions made elsewhere quietly reshaped her future. When she eventually returned to Korea and spoke directly with Ador, the tone shifted. Reflection replaced resistance. And with that, one more piece of the puzzle fell into place. By the end of it all, NewJeans was no longer standing as five. Contracts were terminated. Lawsuits were filed. Trust was fractured beyond repair. What once looked like a united fight against a company now appeared as a web of conflicting interests, parental influence, and irreversible choices made under pressure. And at the center of the storm stood Danielle, isolated, facing not only legal consequences, but the possibility that the greatest cost was never written into any contract. If you want to stay updated as the trials unfold and more truths come to light, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. This story is far from over, and the next chapter may change everything.